Before E.L. James and her 50 Shades of Grey series ever stormed the bestseller list, Irish author Noelle Harrison was already writing racy prose, so much so that many publishers asked her to tone it down.
Well, that is certainly not the case anymore. If anything, Noelle has been now asked to crank up the saucy factor, and she joins us now. Because before, you are writing saucy enough prose, but they said, no, you can't be publishing that.
Well, I was trying to hide it within my regular novels, and I kind of broke out a little bit in my last book, The Adulteress, where I did have whole erotic chapters. But I was told to tone it down, and I did actually, one of my books was rejected because I was told the sex was too explicit.
And then 50 Shades of Grey happened.
I know, thank you very much.
What do you think of it? I mean, I had to put it down. I think I got into around... Well, no, I got just to the first dirty bit, and then I thought, oh, come on. I threw it away.
Well, I think it's coming from a very different tradition from most erotic novels, because she's actually coming from the tradition of the Twilight series. That's what actually inspired her. And I would actually summarise that book as Cinderella with fetish. So I think actually its popularity is down to the romance.
Oh, yeah. What romance.
But
well, anyway.
Okay, but you say that when you're sitting down to write an erotic piece, you need to have romance. There needs to be some kind of story there, love story.
Absolutely. Well, what's the difference between erotica and porn? I mean, that's a question I've been asked a lot.
Well, porn being no emotion, really.
Exactly. So if you're writing erotica, you need to provide characters with inner landscapes. You have to have a story, you have to have depth to it, so that the reader invests with those characters. And then, you know, the most sexy erotics is actually erotics that involves love, of course.
And this book here, Valentina.
Yes.
Tell us about the protagonist. Who is she?
Valentina is a very interesting young lady. She's quite different from the 50 Shades of Grey Anastasia, because Valentina actually is a free spirit. She's a libertine. However, she's also a very elegant young woman. She's actually inspired by an Italian character called Valentina, created by the Italian graphic artist Guido Crepax in the late 60s, and he was inspired by Louise Brooks in turn, so she's quite an interesting contradiction.
And Louise Brooks is a very real person. I think we have a picture of her as well. She was a silent movie star.
Beautiful looking creature.
Absolutely stunning. She was an amazing silent movie star in Hollywood in the 1920s, and then she actually went out to Germany, and her most successful films she made in the late 20s. The most successful one was Pandora's Box, and if you ever see that film, she's incredible. This kind of mix of mischievous and sexy, and she's not a femme fatale. There's a boyishness to her as well. But she was blacklisted by Hollywood, actually.
Why? She was just too naughty?
She kind of, yes, she was. She was too outspoken. She was very liberated for her time. So she was quite upfront about her sexuality, and she slept with men and women. It's said that she actually slept with Greta Garbo.
Okay. And she slept with men and women too, I think.
Yes.
So the story
she was
goes.
very liberal.
Okay, so tell us about your Valentina, because you write it under the name Evie Blake.
I do, yes.
Why?
That's my... Well, the reason is it's quite different from my other novels. So though I did always write erotics, Valentina is full-on erotica. That's why it's my longest book, because the sex scenes are so long. I mean, there's a lot of erotics in it. So I decided to distinguish that and use a different name. But Valentina, in my book, I've transported the 1960s Valentina and made her a modern girl. And the idea in the book is that it's the parallel story of our modern Valentina and her great-grandmother, Belle, in Venice in the 20s, who is the kind of the ancestor of this free spirit that goes through the maternal line of Valentina's
the libertine.
The libertine free spirit.
How would you say that you write good erotica? You know, that's not... Cause sometimes it gets ridiculous, and sometimes it's just hilarious.
Yes, it's
in a bad way.
It's a fine art, I think. I studied a lot of work by writers like Anais Nin and Henry Miller. I don't know if you're familiar with their writing, but it's very explicit. If you're writing erotica, you can't be shy. You have to be brave. You have to be willing to expose yourself a little bit. But at the same time, you can use quite a lot of poetics and imagery. So you can be quite fantastical, but you've got to be careful with your terminology.
Are you exploding some myths in this book?
What do you mean?
Careful with your terminology, I love it.
Sadomasochism.
Yes.
You are?
Yes.
How so?
Well, I think a lot of people have been a little bit upset by 50 Shades of Grey and the depiction of S&M in that book. and that they believe, or they're getting the impression that it's demeaning for women, that, you know, to show that you love a man, you have to force yourself to be submissive, okay?
She's a bit of an idiot, though, I must say.
Well,
Even though she's supposed to be really smart, but she doesn't really come across as smart.
Well, I just kind of found it... I actually didn't have a problem with her so much. I actually didn't like the male hero. He wasn't my idea of a dream man.
Yeah.
Whereas in Valentina, her partner is completely different. He wants her to experience, well, be who she is,
Okay.
you know, be a free spirit. So my take on S&M is quite different, and I did actually talk to a lot of people who partake in S&M, and it's more like a game. It's a complicit game, and you know, it's consensual. There's a lot of trust involved, but when you're actually acting as a submissive, it doesn't actually mean that you're demeaning yourself or degrading yourself. It's actually about being the centre of attention, and the dominator has to be very, very sensitive to read what your body finds pleasurable.
Okay.
So it's a fine art, actually.
As well.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have to talk about your workshops.
Oh, yes,
right?
yes.
Because you've got one coming up this Saturday.
This Saturday, the 3rd, yes.
You put one on in England.
I did last weekend.
Yes, and you were surprised at who showed up.
Well, nearly all men. I couldn't believe it. And I've taught many workshops in my time, but this was my first workshop in erotic fiction, and I expected women like myself, or a lot of younger women maybe, and nearly everyone on the workshop was male, which threw me.
Do you think that's to do with the way the male brain works? It sees an idea, like, say, with 50 Shades of Grey, it's a great way to make money, and then they think, well, I can capitalise on this if I write something similar.
Well, to be quite honest, the guys on the workshop weren't there because they wanted to write erotica. They were there for different reasons. There was one guy who was a life coach, and he was there to learn about how to teach his students how to talk to women in an erotic way that wasn't vulgar.
That wasn't vulgar, okay.
Yeah, to
What
learn
did you tell him?
Well, I think I helped him immensely, and he wants me to actually do more work with his students.
Okay.
So to kind of teach them subtleties of how to turn on women, actually.
But do you think this whole, you know, free porn on the internet and the porn generation, really, do you think it has killed people's sense of romance?
Yes, because I think that erotics is romantic as well. And we were talking about romance, and a lot of guys think that when a woman wants romance, it's chocolates and flowers. That's not romance. We're talking erotic romance, which is... I think a lot of women love game playing and role playing and secret trysts and this sort of thing.
Well, Ireland has been your home for many years,
Yes,
so obviously you have spoken to Irish women about this.
Yes.
And what are they telling you?
Well, well, some people are a little bit shocked, actually. Some of the reaction is a fear that it's anti-feminist. But then when we actually talk about it, people are actually very open and quite excited by it, because sex is a part of life. And I think in literature, a lot of writers are scared about writing sex scenes, and actually it's a whole genre that can be opened up.
Okay, and obviously, because people will be asking as we watch the TV, are there places on the workshop available
There
for the
are
weekend?
places available, yes, and you don't have to be a writer. You can be coming from any point of view, you know.
You can be curious.
Very curious, yeah.
Always helps.
Well, good luck with the book.
Thank you. Thanks.
It's called Valentina by Evie Blake, really Noelle Harrison, and it's available now.
Thank you.
Noelle.
Thank you very
Nice to
much.
meet you. Now, after the break, how our most famous historical events are now being told in comic book form. Plus, she drove herself to the Debs. We'll be meeting the latest finalists chosen for Ireland's Ultimate Debutante.